Hello and welcome to the RotD Deep Dive, spoiler-filled discussion on Puppet Master Axis Termination. As this is not going to be strictly about that movie. It's going to be, like I said earlier, a regroup, a recap of where we've been to determine where we are now as we enter into this final leg and get into Puppet Master The Littlest Reich tomorrow. So, this all started back in 1989 with the first Puppet Master movie, and I thought it was an interesting one as far as setting the bar and letting us know what to expect out of the series. The thing that I really loved the most out of this movie, not terribly surprisingly, was the puppets. We got introduced to Pinhead and to Leech Woman and to Tunneler and to Blade especially I loved. The problem I had with it is, as much as I loved them, there really weren't on screen enough. It was only like 5 or 6 minutes total screen time for all of them, and I wanted more puppets. I wanted more puppet kills. But I mean, it was imaginative. It was clever. It was silly, stupid fun. The overall plot of the psychics, hashing their stuff out really didn't work for me in the back end, but moving on to Puppet Master 2, I thought this one was a slide downward in terms of acting, plot, storyline, all that, but it did have more puppets, it did have slightly more kills, it was a little bit more splatter, creative kind of thing. The main antagonist being Toulon, I really didn't care for, and the over-monologuing was really, really, it was really bad. It was just bad. Fortunately, they seem to have fixed the Toulon character in future installments, but they never really fixed the monologuing. That's something that has continued on throughout the entire series with whatever villain happens to be in play in any given movie throughout the Puppet Master franchise. They always have to be talking to their subordinate or underling and detailing out what their grand plan is as they go through Machiavellian. It's a terrible thing throughout. But you kind of learn to roll with those punches. Up next comes Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, which did bring the character back to his good guy status, a sympathetic, old man that is simply wanting to live his life until people step on him a little too hard, and then he steps back, this time with puppets. It kind of shows the story of why he became on the run from the Nazis that we saw in the very beginning of number 1. And I really, really enjoyed this one. It's no surprise. I mean, if you've seen the review, you've seen the score. But that leads into Puppet Master 4, which jumps us back into present day again. Present day being 1993 at the time. And now we are in my favorite movie so far of the lot. And I dug the way that the puppets interacted with the human and, their master throughout the movie. And I thought it was an interesting kind of creative choice as far as coming up with villain that was puppet-sized and gave them a run for their money. I just thought it was fun, it was creative. I loved the interactions between the puppets and the Puppet Master. Just going out and playing laser tag with them, that was so much fun for me to watch. I was, just a smile from ear to ear on that one. Then we get to 5, which is a continuation of that wonderful storyline, and it all just takes a dump. Everything about it stalls out. What you end up having is something that should have been taken care of within 5 pages, stretched out throughout an entire movie, making it entirely boring. So, pretty poor there. Then we get into Curse of the Puppet Master, which reboots the whole storyline idea. It doesn't reboot the entire franchise, but it reboots the storyline idea, gives us a fresh take, a fresh setting, a fresh new set of characters, and ultimately doesn't work, in my opinion. The tank character was just kind of very one note. Everybody about it actually seemed pretty one note, and the storyline didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It didn't know which direction it wanted to go. it just didn't have a whole lot to offer, in my opinion. It was so far the lowest scoring movie of the bunch, but not the worst movie. It's just kind of interesting how that worked out, and I'll get into that. The next one is Retro Puppet Master, which went back in time again, and this time Toulon as a young man in, I'm assuming, the late 1800s in Paris, played by the iconic Greg Sestero. And the plot of this one really didn't matter to me. I mean, it was okay. It sort of worked, sort of didn't. But the ultimate thing that I really had an issue with on this one is how toned down it was. There was hardly any blood, if any. I refused to go back and watch it again to try and find a drop of it, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't a drop of it to be found. When you're dealing with killer puppets, you need to have killer puppets. They kind of made up for it by having villains that were mummies, so as they were slashing and drilling into them, it was, of dust. Didn't really work for me. The whole plot line, all the elements of about the Puppet Master franchise that I loved really weren't terribly present in this one. So it was disappointing for me. I know a lot of people say that it was really good. I have to disagree. I did not care for Retro Puppet Master at all. Then we get into Puppet Master The Legacy, which is pretty much exactly what I'm doing here, brought to cinematic form for an hour and a half. It was a recap. It was your sitcom where it was doing a flashback episode. Everybody sitting around saying, hey, remember when last Christmas we did this? And it would show 5 minutes of that. That's all this movie did. It would have 2 or 3 minutes of a central storyline peppered throughout, where all they did was hark back, well, remember when Toulon did it? And show 15 minutes of this movie. Well, that's true, except, the other Puppet Master did this. Show 15 minutes of that movie. It was pointless. The only reason it got a score as high as it did was because of the intent category. It was intending to be a made-for-nothing cash grab to continue the franchise and the licensing rights and make some money off of a VHS cassette that cost them nothing to produce. And I gave it points for that and for the sheer bravado, the cojones that it brought to the table by even releasing this stupid movie. So in my opinion, yeah, the worst of the bunch. Then we get into Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys, a non-canonical split from the franchise, but it was something that Sci-Fi put together, as in Sci-Fi Channel, for an original movie, and it took 2 different franchises, Puppet Master and the Demonic Toys franchise, and put them together with Corey Feldman playing the lead role. The name of this game was strictly fun. It was fun. It wasn't entirely gory. It wasn't a horror movie strictly, but it it was a lot of fun, and I thought was a decent entry into the Puppet Master series, even if it's not considered to be canonical by fans. The only thing I really didn't like about it was how much they changed the aesthetic look of the puppets to make them, more bright, more cheerful. I wish they had simply taken the original puppets and put them in this movie. I don't know if they couldn't get them. If they couldn't, I don't know why they couldn't recreate them faithfully. My big complaint there. Then we get into the Axis trilogy, which, Axis of Evil, Axis Rising, and the last one, Axis Termination. I'm really not going to go into, a lot of detail on those just because they're so fresh in the reviews. You can just go back and watch them if you want. But overall, I think that what we wound up with is a franchise that is not afraid to be itself and to know what it is supposed to bring to the table. It is not yet self-parodying, in my opinion. It is simply self-aware and knowing that it is supposed to be about the puppets and the kills. And I think especially with this last movie, it really brought that point home. Having Blade come out of the guy's torso, with his head, and there was some pretty imaginative, bloody, gory kills in this one, and I was really happy to see that. And the fact that they had the puppets as animated and as interactive with the humans as they did, I thought that they finally really nailed down the elements that I was really wanting to see. And I thought it was a great way to end the series. Now we got a reboot in play, and I'm very curious to see what we do with that. If it's going to have the same designs, if it's going to have the same principles, if it's going to have the same feel. If this one is going to go the way that a lot of reboots do and go darker, more serious, take the concept and make it more gritty, real. We'll see. I'm very curious about that. I will be watching that tonight and reviewing it tomorrow. So look for me there. I really thank you for joining me on this Puppet Master journey, and I genuinely thank you for making me a part of your day. So until tomorrow.